Ready, go whenever you are. There we go.
Okay.
And we're back.
Hi there. This is the newsstreamingnetwork.com, WGSN-DB Going Solo Network, radio, TV, and podcast #1 internet singles talk network. And this is Let's Talk Dating with Christine and Barry. Hi, Barry.
Hi, Christine.
So today we're going to talk about dating across cultural differences. We're such a global, connected society now. I mean, we can hear news in 2 seconds about anything that's happening anywhere in the world, and people are pretty mobile, and people are meeting, online in all sorts of places. So I think that this could be helpful if you are going to date somebody from another culture or another race or religion. We'll cover all of that to do some homework, because boy, you can sure put your foot in it, huh, Barry?
Oh, there's myriad opportunities in which we can mess up our what's what I'm looking for. I was going to say foreplay, but in terms of
well, that too.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because a friend of mine, he moved to Thailand and fell in love with a Thai woman, got married, and that's his life over there. Coming from America, that's definitely a transformational experience and definitely a shift for him. So I know there are things that different cultures offer that can be received by our own viewpoints, maybe inaccurately, which can be one of the challenges. And that's the thing we talk about today, is definitely the cultural differences. And even, frankly, in our hometowns with people who come from other places or different races or different religious beliefs, there are differences that can create discord or difference between us, so that we don't necessarily know. I should say, we may put our foot in it when we're in communication with them or reaching to do something without checking first. So this can be a fun conversation.
Did your friend talk about any of the cultural differences when he moved to Thailand and got married?
No, he wanted something very different, and I didn't hear about his growing pains there. I just saw the results, sort of thing. So he definitely worked his way into it the right way. So maybe you should write a book about that at some point.
Yeah, it might be helpful. So I think just in dating in general, in relationships and interacting with people, it's always important not to assume that everybody's talking the same, thinking the same, brought up the same, has the same meaning for everything, does everything the same. And in this arena, oh my gosh, it would be so important to ask and do some research. And oh yeah. So my personal experience, I've dated a lot of different cultures, different religions. It's been so fascinating because I have dated between my 2 marriages longer, and now again since my husband died. And I don't have an issue about who I've dated. Sometimes I found there were some things that seemed like part of their culture that wasn't going to work for the two of us.
Mm-hmm.
So I do a Monday night Zoom for singles, and there's a young lady that's a widow, and she's Korean. And it's so funny, this week was about the things that the top 2 things that you would need to find out that they couldn't have or they had to have. And we all know that her first thing is going to be that they have to like kimchi.
Mm-hmm.
Have to. It is a deal maker and breaker because it's at every meal.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And it's pretty intense. And if you don't like it, you won't even be able to be in the house if you don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really important to find out it's something could be so obtuse as food, but she makes it in her house and it smells. They make it at all of her family things, and they have it at even Thanksgiving. It was part of the meal. So
Right.
to find that out, if that's something that's not your thing, you won't be dating her. So there's really weird things, like, even who would think food, right? You would think there'd be so many bigger things.
Well, we talked about, we may have talked in another episode about the thing about vegan and vegetarian versus non-vegan type people. So that kind of falls under that same umbrella, although in this case it's definitely a cultural thing, because there are certain flavors that are definitely tied to cultures. I went to college with a lot of Indian, Persian, and Malaysian people. I should say, in the host residence when I was living in college, that was the hallway we shared. And so there were 2 of us were British, the rest were all foreign, so to speak. But it meant that the cooking, so to make food for a second, was always interesting. And I mean, probably the first place I really got to really enjoy Indian food authentically, because I had Indian food growing up, being from East London. Indian restaurants were everywhere. That was one of the things that happened because of the cultural influx through East from Europe. And the quality of Indian food was more basic, but more real because it was home cooked by the people who lived in the hallway.
Yeah.
But the thing is, and this I know very true about a lot of Indian people growing up that way, was that you could smell the food it was in their pores because they inhaled so much particular flavors and savory elements from the things they took from, from where it's turmeric and curry powders and garam masala, all these different things. It's like it wasn't just in the food; it's because they had it so much; it was in their pores. And if you didn't like it, you couldn't be around them either. So that's another level of that thing. It wasn't even in the food, just about being around their being. It wasn't even in their house. It was wherever they were. They carried, it was in their aura almost, that craziness. So understanding that there are things that are important. And I know there are the same things with us Westerners that are going to smell weird to people of other cultures too. So it's not just one way, just to be clear about that. We're not saying it's just other people are weird to us. It's going to be both ways because we don't have certain things in our aromatic expression, shall we say.
I love how you put that. I'm going to steal that. I love it.
Sure.
Because I have a really sensitive nose. I really do. I got it from my mom, my bionic nose. And I love aromatic expression because there are cultural smells and not even just the food, but every Indian home I have personally been in, I don't know if it's all, but all the ones have some sort of incense. It's just part of what they do in their homes. And so far, I haven't had an unpleasant one. I've heard there's some unpleasant. I've liked them. There'd be no way that I could be with someone who needed to have this scent in their house that I found offensive or upsetting to my stomach or bothered my nose. That it's nothing wrong with them. It just doesn't work for me. So these are things I'm glad that we're bringing them up because we'll talk about all the things everybody else thinks about that they wouldn't think food and smell necessarily, but it is so part of who they are as a person, as a community, as their family, as their country. And to say, gosh, I really accept this about you. I understand it. I want to learn about it. And yeah, I can do this or I can't do this. And to just be, the thing I keep saying to people is they're just not your person. You're just not their person. It makes it so much more benign than, oh, I'm so rejected. And why can't they get over it? We like who people are. They're diverse and interesting. They just don't have to be our person. And could be this basic reason that we don't like how they smell, even though they bathe all the time. It's just this is part of their culture. Yeah.
And that's the thing about cultural differences is that I'm glad we started with this one as well, because it's not one of the ones we normally think about. We normally think about, because they have different belief systems or different rules or the way the house they live in or in those sort of things, which we'll talk about as well. But it can be as simple as the food and the smells that they have and they enjoy. They're different. And I've frankly become a fan of a lot of spicy foods in different cultures. So I have a lot of I have Korean spices and Chinese spices and Indian spices that I even cook with as well. Not saying I'm cooking traditional meals from those countries. I like the flavors in the food I cook. So for me, I welcome and enjoy that difference in the sense. But there are some people, well, let's be blunt, some people can't have any spice of any sort. So they can have a hard time dealing with any culture that only doesn't have spice, that has spice in it. Because frankly, I would say that most Western faiths have less spice than pretty much anywhere else on the planet, even though the spice trade was so big back in the 1800s. So,
and I'm very much, I like the spicy flavor. I don't do heat. When I started my first company, that went out the window. My stomach said, we're not eating that kind of hot, spicy stuff anymore. So I'm very upfront about that. And if that's the only way you can eat, then we're not going to be each other's people. And my family, they are spice, hot, and hottest. I mean, really, they all like so much more than me. So my little thing with the international no sign sitting over here on the side, whenever we order stuff, they always get the thing for Auntie Chrissy because I still like the flavor, but my stomach says, you will be so sorry.
Mm.
So the other thing I learned from my Korean person that comes on Monday is her preference when she goes out on a date is to sit side by side, because in their culture, they don't do this kind of conversation. They do this kind of conversation. They have
Oh,
the bowls and they eat and they talk, and it's a very connected talking. How I said, oh, well, that would be so interesting, because I wouldn't know that without having met you, because I always sit across because I like having the eye contact and I
right.
like staring at them and I like when they stare at me. And I would wonder, I would ask. And so now I know that that's really pretty pervasive in their culture,
Hmm.
that this is how they sit at their family tables, and they're all connecting and having a lovely time. But if our normal thing, our what feels normal to us, is to do this, we would wonder, and would be important to have a conversation about it.
It's funny because I have a different viewpoint on that, which is intriguing because the thing about, yes, there is the sitting across from each other, but I know having a couple of relationships I was in was pretty soon after we got together and we were like in relationship. We'd always sit side by side. It was just more affectionate that way because we could lean into each other and we could hold hands and stay connected. And there was something that was easier. Plus, the other thing is, especially in public spaces in large restaurants, it's easy to hear each other when you're next to each other than when you're across the table from each other. So there was benefits to that. So I didn't know that was a cultural thing. I just thought it was just different. That was the way I had to like it. So personally, there's a pleasure in sitting side by side because it's pluses. And yes, maybe it's the difference between someone who's a visual reference or someone who's a kinesthetic reference. That might be part of it too. But I definitely found that the side by side totally works for me in my experience, and that wasn't cultural at all. That's just the way I found enjoyable. So
That's interesting. So my
yeah.
preference on the first meeting, either to sit across from each other, or if it's like a booth, I like sitting, one person's in the back and I'm
Mhm.
like on the side. I
Yeah.
wouldn't do this first time. I certainly like this later when we're more connected. And then
Yeah.
the other thing she mentioned was, when they're doing this, they're also trying and feeding, and there's this whole sharing thing going on, which also is part of the sitting side by side. And I thought,
Interesting.
yeah, I wouldn't do that with somebody brand new. I'd certainly do that with somebody I'd been dating for a while. I'm happy to share and taste theirs. And because I am such a space conscious person, so here we are with this very different way of looking at, it would feel weird to me that if somebody wanted me to sit right next to them the very
Mhm.
first time out, it would feel in my space and I want to do this. And
Right.
but if they said this would be my preference and I'd say this is my preference, we would, me, I'd be having a conversation, explain more about why. And would it feel comfortable enough because of your reasons, or would you be comfortable enough? And how could we start out half of it across, and then I'll
Mhm.
see if I feel comfortable enough to move. You know me, I got to talk of it. I got lots of words. Christine's got
Oh yeah.
lots of words
Oh yeah.
all the time.
Yep.
You can
But
count
it's
on me to have lots of questions.
well, that's the other part too. Ideally, is when you are meeting somebody for the first time, meeting a different culture, is be inquisitive, be inquiring, be curious, and also be open to try something new because that's the biggest thing. Some people in the dating arena are so stuck in their ways and so rigid about the way they should be and do things, be in the relationship or be in the connection, and how the person should be with them. All these different things that it doesn't even mean about cultural differences. Just someone who they're dating is going to be different from them, period, regardless of the cultural difference. And so a lot of this is an opportunity for those who, if you're listening or watching a podcast, is reflect on your own comfort level and preferences and what works for you, because you might discover you got some attachments perhaps to ways of things that are being, and if they're not that way, does it throw you? So all these things
Mhm.
about cultural differences really translate to just personal differences, because that's the thing that we don't always look at, is how we get put off by it or attracted by it, the way someone does something different from us. So hopefully this will help you with that.
Yeah, I mean, just learning about the whole point of the first meeting, especially, is to learn about them and tell them
Hmm.
about you and see, do we have enough in common that we'd want to see each other another time? Yeah,
Absolutely.
but certainly cultural things. So I met somebody a couple months ago, and he said, we'd been talking for a while and I hadn't even thought to ask, but he said, do you wonder what kind of Asian I am? It was the funniest question. And I said, well, I hadn't quite got there, but sure, because he's 6'6", and he said he's Indonesian. And I didn't know Indonesian people were so tall, but he's also part Dutch, which apparently is tall too. And
Uh,
so we talked about some of their cultural things, and that was really interesting because they do very family kind of meals, and it's very sharing kind of meals. And so the first time out, he's like, well, would you like to? Because this is what we do. And I'm like, well, okay. But, we
Mm-hmm.
didn't eat each other, but we shared, the food. And because not everybody's open to that the first time out, I'd love to
Right.
taste what you're eating and put some on a plate, use a different fork, especially
Mm-hmm.
since COVID, people are more cautious. But to learn, and it was fun that he was so forthcoming, because we know I'd be asking questions, but he just told me. And so I got to learn more about the Indonesian and Dutch culture because I knew nothing about either one of them.
Yeah, that can be some of the times one of the best things about meeting somebody new is to actually seek out somebody who's a different culture, so you get to learn about what they're about and what's different about it. Because expanding a worldview is a good thing anyway. That's a whole other topic as well. For me, the one I was thinking of this also because I where I'm invested spiritually and connected with my community there, we're a lot of cross-cultural connections there because the majority of people who go there are either Caucasian or African American, and even that is a cultural difference too. And so, and having caught up certain experiences talking to friends of mine, there are different things that they experience in life because of the color of their skin that we don't as white people, as Caucasians, which can be a really eye-opening experience if you're willing to face that and realize that maybe we've had, and this is something we talk about as a much bigger philosophical discussion. In some ways, we've had it so easy being fair-skinned because we haven't had necessarily the viewpoint of being looked at as being different, less than, all these different things that unfortunately people of color have had to put up with because of the way the Western white world has acted towards them. Mm-hmm. And so one of the challenges with dating across cultural differences is to have compassion, at least, an understanding of someone else's experience that's different from your own. Because the thing is, we look at the world through the lens we can only look through, which is our own. That's the way life is. And when we meet somebody who's different from that, it's easy to assume that they have the same viewpoint we do. And this is a trap we fall into. And so we end up making lots of assumptions about that person and don't actually find it for ourselves what's real, what's true. So they don't actually have a voice of their own if we do it that way. So it's important in dating across cultural differences, if that's the title, is to be, as I said earlier, about being curious, being inquisitive, to find out somebody else's viewpoints, because it's too tempting sometimes to presume or assume about them. And it will be much more eye-opening and, frankly, humbling to ask them what their perspective is, what their experience is, what they think of this, what their beliefs are, what they went through, what they've had to experience themselves. So we can see, one, the differences, but two, the gap we want to bridge so we can get to connect to them. So it's a better way of approaching things.
Such an important point. And I'm going to tag on to that because I've dated Black men. I have Black friends. And one of the things they get frustrated about is that we start assuming that they feel badly about something without asking. Mm-hmm. So I want to hear about something that bothers them or that I could do different or better. And it's amazing how many times they go, stop assuming I'm upset about something. Stop assuming something would upset me. Because me personally, they're telling me that I don't take personally because it's not me. It's not who I am. And I am my person. And this is what I feel about that. And this is what would upset me. So both ways, just ask what's going on for you, because you're different than me, period. And you've certainly had different life experiences, period. And coming from a different culture, different background, in this very specific way we're talking about today, please inform me. So I don't put my foot in my mouth, or I don't assume you can't take care of yourself, or that you're going to be thin-skinned or sensitive about something that it turns out you're not. Because my friends have been so frustrated about people, I'm sticking up for you, and they're like, I didn't need it. I wasn't upset. You thought I was upset? Why did you think? Well, I just assumed. Well, I wasn't upset. I mean, that's been the funniest conversation ever, because you think you see the other way so often, but there's this whole side that I need people to hear. Knock it off.
Yeah, the trap we fall into when we make assumptions is dangerous, and that's regardless of whether it's cultural differences or not. It's like we've talked in many episodes before about the difference between the men and women, that we make assumptions about that difference and don't really honor or respect the difference that we have. So to do that across cultural differences as well is another level, another layer, another understanding that we have, frankly, so much to learn. if we're willing to be humble enough to actually ask questions and be inquisitive and curious about what's going on, because that is the way of doing it differently. Absolutely.
I love how you put it up leveling, because I like that too. I think it's
Yeah.
very much up leveling, that you assume nothing, confirm everything, clarifying. And what's cool is if you did think, oh, I think I'm going to know the answer, and you ask and you knew the answer, good on you.
Yeah.
I have found lots of times I didn't know the answer. I waited and I was completely surprised by their answer. And I'm really glad I asked before
Absolutely.
just saying something. I mean, it's nice we've known each other long enough that we have an understanding that if somebody says something where, oh, geez, I wish I could reel that back and I feel silly for saying it, but we're okay about it.
Yeah.
So we're going to continue this. We're both going to jump in. This interesting, very intriguing conversation with Barry and I about cross-cultural differences when we come back from our commercial break.
See you in a moment.
Thank you. Hi there, we're back with Let's Talk Dating with Christine and Barry, and we're talking about dating across cultural differences. So one of the big challenges, I think, is religion. There's often a very specific religion for each culture, even though there can be different levels and different variances and different beliefs. Definitely don't assume, and find out how important it is to them to practice it, to attend, to what are their special occasions that happen with their families or at their house of worship. And does that work for you? Is that something that you are fine being friends with? Is it something that goes against everything that you believe? Or is it something you're like, wow, I think I could be part of that? And I know you have a lot of diverse in the religion. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about that for sure.
Well, first of all, coming from being born and raised Jewish in a very Christian Church of England and Catholic culture that set me up right from the beginning to be different from and wary of everything else. So that was one of the things, and because the biggest, and I'm not going to go a bit religious in the moment, but just to say this, one of the biggest challenges I had as growing up is having these people who looked down on me because they had Jesus saving them and they wasn't going to save me because Jesus wasn't, and now I know, looking back in hindsight, like Jesus was never a Christian anyway, so Jesus was a Jew, so we get over that. But that's a hindsight thing. But the reality is I saw the difference very early on, and so I guess part of me had that built-in presumption that whoever I meet is going to be different from me in some way, shape, or form. It's been lucky that way. And yes, so having gone through that and then been on the spiritual path for decades, I've definitely how to say this, I'm not a follower of, but I didn't become aware of other teachings, whether it's Buddhist or Muslim or some other form or other thing. It's just recognizing that, as one of my teachers said once, which I love the understanding, is there are many paths, just one destination. And if I can hold that space to be true inside myself, when I meet somebody, if I'm attracted to them as somebody to date or just a friend, to know that their belief system, as long as it's additive, not subtractive from what I'm doing, is totally fine, because it's about understanding and appreciating what somebody finds as the resonance for them that keeps them connected to their heart, to their spirituality, to truth, to love, whatever those things are. Because to me, any religious teaching has to, and this is my assumption here, has to somehow bring you back to your heart and to your caring. If it doesn't do that, then that's the thing where I think there's a bit of an issue there. So yeah, I definitely had a lot of experience with people of different religious faiths and teachings, but finding also that a lot of times it was easy to connect with them that way. There wasn't like a wall in between us. There was just an assumption. So yeah, it works.
How does it bring out your humanity, right?
Yeah.
And boy, that is so true, that I've met so many, because I went on a quest to leave the church that I was baptized in and ended up going back to it, knowing that that's where I landed. And fed my heart. And I was like, well, I get to make a decision now, and instead of my parents pushing me there. That so many religions, if people have really found their place, they're so wonderful to be with, because they feel that this piece has been added to their life. They feel whole. They feel like they have a part of a community, that they have something that feels bigger than them, that they have some sort of rituals or regular routine things that happen in their life because of that. And
Yeah.
I found really drawn to being with people that have that as part of their life, even if we don't have that in common and wouldn't necessarily be together as a couple. It's been fascinating to just know that how important that is in my life, and how to find people that it's important in their life. And so there's people who it's not important to them if they're on more of a spiritual path rather than a more religious path, or if they're atheist or agnostic. It's really helpful to be really clear about, this is who I am and what works for me. And I think it's cool what works for you. And if we need a person that's more in alignment, then we're not each other's people. But you don't know that until you talk about it. And then it's like, but they're so cute. I go, I know, but this is probably more value to one or both of you. And if it's cute is going to get old really fast.
Oh, absolutely. Danger, Will Robertson. Yeah, absolutely. No, for me, and it's interesting because there are, as said, I said a lot of people from religious I come to understand and be around. And there's also certain religious beliefs or rule-driven structures that I do not fit with, just to be clear. So it's not, I'm not going to say that everybody there is, but there are certain people's belief systems that, especially when it becomes one where they want to paint you with the same brush, where I go, no, thank you. It's got to be something that's additive and value, not just convincing or controlling. Because some of the religious teachings out there have a real sense of, well, put it politely, an enrollment desire. And we're bringing people into the fold. And it's like, that's not the way to do it. It's like you share what you're teaching. If people like it, they'll come follow you. If they don't, they don't. Make it easy. So,
Not my style either. So the other thing that I have found that's really a variety out there is family involvement. It could be to the point where they are going to interview you to see if you fit with their family. I mean, not so much as arranged marriages, because that's still a little, but not as much anymore.
Right.
But there's some that it's the person you're dating, they get this is going to be part of it, and you're going to go and you're going to sit with them, and they're going to ask you, who are your people and what are your beliefs? And I've never had it ever be mean. I've certainly been interviewed though. And then there's some where the families aren't very involved. There's the ones that they don't like each other. That's a whole nother thing, but that's not generally cultural. There are some cultures where, let us know what's going on, and we don't do as many things together. It's not how we show our love and caring. We love and care about each other a lot. It's just, and because that doesn't work for me either. I like more of a middle thing. And I was fascinated. I go, do you not, I mean, I did a lot of do you not like each other? No, we like each other a lot. And the few times that I was like, yeah, they really do. But they have separate lives, and it worked for them. And it seemed to be a cultural thing. And I was like, well, okay. So it's fascinating to say, what are the things that you have to have in your life? And is it the same thing important to them, and about in the same scale? Because it could be way too much or way too little. And people don't want to pay attention to this, especially if they're really cute. But you need to pay attention to cultural differences, because it's going to affect you down the road if you aren't the same in the really important ways.
In some ways, this whole conversation is about how accepting can you be of other people's choices? Because the challenge is sometimes in dating, we have a fixed vision of what we want to have. I mean, if you just if you're single and you're on the dating apps, you know what your criteria are, and is your criteria too contained or contrived or controlled versus open enough to expand? So this conversation hopefully is giving some food for thought, because we are looking at the possibilities of opening yourself up to new cultures, new viewpoints, new ways of doing things maybe you weren't open to before. And so with that, you might discover your dating pool expands, and you might find somebody who is actually the person you want to be with, who is in a whole different camp than you thought you would look for. So this conversation, frankly, is an eye-opening opportunity or I should say a mind-expanding possibility, so you can see things through a different lens and maybe see different choices ahead of you.
And I've experienced a couple of when I've coached in from other countries, there's still chaperones that are required.
Yep.
It's often a person in the same age group because I was surprised. I thought it would be more of a parent, and they said no, it just has to be somebody that's a peer usually. And or there's cultures where they're fine with people going out in groups. And I said, even in our age, and they said, because they figured you might get in trouble even at our adult age, right? And I thought, that's really interesting. And it seems to work because everybody there knows that this is what happens, and they don't question it. It's if you don't like it, then leave. But trying to do that, if that's not your way, you would have lots of questions about it. And so to find out, this is what it is, it works for them, does it work for you or not? Because we're not used to that at all. I mean, we're having coffee dates with one person, we're going to dinner with one person, and that they need to bring somebody along. I've met a couple men recently who they were surprised that they said, I have to bring a friend along. But they told them ahead of time because they were now going to pay for 3 dinners instead of 2.
Okay.
And it really was their culture. And they were in this age group over 50, but it was still the way that they were raised when they were younger, and they still are doing it now when they're older. I mean, wow, how nice for women. I mean, I do all sorts of safeguards when I go out with somebody, and I teach all my clients, but you're even safer now that you have an actual another person with you. So I don't sneeze at it, but you sure do need to know that it's a cultural thing. It's not I want you to pay for dinner for somebody else because I'm a gold digger. Because I'm sure that could be too. But in these cases, it truly wasn't. It was really a thing. There you go. As a guy, good to know, right? You might be buying 3 dinners.
Yeah,
Maybe
absolutely.
lunch is better to do 3 lunches.
Absolutely. But there's one thing I want to play on top of that too, and actually from the other point of view. We're talking about dating across cultural differences. So the question I want to put out to you, if you're listening and watching our talk, is what is your cultural difference? What is it that you have set up as your rules or ways of doing things? And are they really that strong for you? Because the other thing part of this too is that if you know that you've got cultural ways of doing things that you're inherently biased towards because of your family upbringing or religious upbringing, whatever that is, if that's important to you, don't throw it under the bus. Because there may be a part of you, because we talked about, crossing that bridge into other cultures and being open to new possibilities. But the truth is, if you know your belief systems, cultural choices are yours and you love them and you abide by them, then don't fool yourself into thinking you can just erase that and go and check somebody else's out. Yes, you want to make friends from other places, certainly. But if you're dating, it's almost like it's got to put that onto your dating profile list of qualities. It's going to include what are your religious preferences, what are your distance preferences, what are your food differences. So you basically make sure that you know what your cultural reference points are that are important to you. Because sometimes you look at them in the mirror and go, hang on a second, that doesn't mean anything to me anymore. Then you can dispense with it. But it's good to know ahead of time what you really are before you start dating anybody. So when you do meet somebody, you know where you stand, which is important.
And I like that you emphasized, and don't throw it under the bus.
Yeah.
I mean, if you say, this doesn't fit me anymore, great. And if you say, this is still who I am, and I only can be this way, I'm going to be my best person this way, and I'm going to explain it to the other person and listen to what they say and believe them, because the way that you get through the long haul, however many years we have left, you don't want to be fighting about that. You don't want to be annoyed about it. You don't want to be frustrated about it, because both people will be equally frustrated if one of you has something that you've sacrificed that's below the good enough line, that you can't abide by it in the long run. Then don't go there. Please don't go there, even though they're cute. I'm going to keep saying that because I hear that.
Cute thing.
Keep hearing it. Like, but they're so cute, or gosh, they're fun, and I get all that. I want all that. I want you to have all that, and really stick to your things that you have to have, and they need to stick to the things they have to have. And do they mesh? There's plenty of people that you'll mesh with if that's not your person.
We have talked in the show more than enough times about having clarity about what your green flags and red flags are. This is under the heading of the green flags, but also the red flags too, is what I said earlier about how it's important to know what you really do stand by, what your truths are, so you can live by those. At the same time, know what you want to have that you must have in that partnership. because it's interesting because I went through in my teen years an experience of being an atheist and agnostic at different times because I didn't know what to believe. I was going through my own confusion, spiritual crisis, so to speak, after my bar mitzvah. So I have compassion for people who are, or understand people who have different viewpoints. But in terms of dating, I need someone who's got a spiritual belief system, for example, that's not tied to a religious structure and is not rigid or rule driven, because that's not my way of doing things. And that will work. So I know for myself what that's my particular cultural bent, so to speak, or my spiritual bent. So to meet somebody who has, goes to church their own way on Sundays and they've got to believe in Christ and they take away from all the different things they do, just won't work for me. And that's okay. That's the truth. So again, honoring your own truth, knowing what is important to you, what is your green flag, what are your red flags, and own those places, because this dealing across cultural differences is not like you have to understand it. It's like you have to know what you want and what works for you. That's really where we start.
Oh my gosh, well, religion can be such a hot button because it's in your DNA, whatever you figured out, whether it was factory installation or your parents gave it to you, or you've now found your own. When you have that space inside of you, that even atheists and agnostics, they filled up that space with, I don't believe. Great. It's not an empty space. That if you have an empty space, it's important to keep looking to see what it is that you do believe, what do you not believe, and then go out and look and explore with people. And it's another way to get to know a lot about other cultures and other religions, to find your place. Because when you find your place, then your people, at least for this category, will be there. But so often I find people who have a hole in that spot, and they don't understand what a deficit it is until we talk about, well, where's the other things that are falling short because you don't have that? You don't believe that there's a higher power of some sort, or you don't believe that you have some inner guidance. You don't believe in any of that. Well, then it could be a really big problem with dating. So to figure out what your foundation is, whatever it is, even non-believers, I'm not telling anybody they have to believe anything, but to get really clear about, this is who I am, and this is what I believe. I believe about not believing, or I believe this. And so that you really can have this conversation with people, because people who don't have something at all, I find they're floundering a lot. It's kind of sad, even though this is not really a religious subject, but it certainly is a piece of it. And they'll sometimes fall for anything. So it's kind of a problem in dating, where people can sometimes take advantage of them if you haven't figured out this piece of yourself. That's my little soapbox for that part. But have you found that too? Have you found that too, Barry, in your coaching?
I'd say more in my personal life than in coaching per se, because in coaching it's easy to stay somewhat detached and be with them where they are, and use what they have as their understanding as the vehicle through which to help them transform. So I don't have a block or a red flag about client-based conversations, but in terms of personal dating and relationship, as I said, I've definitely had experience of people who have this born again response, which is one of those things where I just go to a different place. I'll be polite. Where it doesn't work for me. That's clear. So having a true understanding and a appreciation for the difference is, again, as we said before, is a key thing as well. And recognizing that what's different is okay. One of the things I've learned, I think I should have said in the show, but not, I just want to say that that the question I have is, if you meet somebody who's different faith than you, are you going to close the door right away from you meet them, or are you going to be willing to learn more about them just to find out more perception, more difference? Because again, as you said earlier in the show, some part of this can be like being curious and be interested in somebody else. It's like research. You want to find out more about another culture, another person, another way of doing things. You can add value to your own life. So why not be intrigued about that versus, I'm just going to cast them aside because they're not my person, then do different from me. Like, be open to things. You never know what might happen.
Oh, is that important? So, seeking out people that are in other cultural differences might be an interesting, join a club or attend an event that is a whole different culture. I got invited last year to go to this flamenco event that was so amazing. The dancing, it was this world-renowned company that happened to come to Long Beach, and it was astounding. The audience was as much fun to watch as the performances, and the conversation in the bathroom with the ladies with all their beautiful outfits that they'd made. And it was so fun to just talk about, tell me more about where this came from, and how, what the basis of it is, and how it's part of your celebration, that even if it's not your thing, eventually, how you'll learn a lot about another culture. So to seek out other places, because it might be you're like, I like this and I like these people and I'd like to learn more about them, and maybe I'll even find my person here. So I love the idea of not closing any doors just because it's different.
Right. And I mean, as much as we talk about dating in the show, because that's the title of the show, to be a curious adventurer, to explore and be an explorer of new cultures can be something that's really joyful and fulfilling as well. And so I highly recommend, if you do, not saying you need to go check out every religion on the planet, but if you do meet somebody who's from a different place and they become a friend, especially somebody you feel like you trust as a friend, be willing to ask them to introduce you to their understanding, their perceptions, just because, again, expanding your own horizons, having you understand more fully, and creating more of a humility in your own self, that there's more than one way to do things.
Yeah.
So,
and if anything, it might convince you, oh yeah, that's so not me. I really am more convinced that this is me. And I compared. I mean, that's what the whole dating process is, that you keep comparing and contrasting and going, yeah, I like that, but not all that. And, oh, I like more of that. And, oh, I like all of that. So to do that in the cultural arena is great, as long as you're sensitive and you ask. I always ask, what are the rules? Am I supposed to wear something specific? Am I supposed to do something? And then I can decide if I don't want to, because of all the rules. I always ask the rules, though, because I want to be respectful. I'm going to their arena. I'm going to what they're doing. And how do I know if I'm going to like it or not if I don't just go once? And nothing I've asked has been a problem for me. And so I'll go. And it's amazing the kind of stuff that you could learn. It's really fun.
Oh, yeah. So time to wrap.
Yes, I think so. Thank you for listening. So if this has even come up in your life and you've had a problem with it, it didn't work out, and you'd like some more information, or you're intrigued to maybe go try it and you'd like somebody watching your back and giving you some guidance along the way, that's what Barry and I do. And we're so excited to have you reach out to us. So the best way to reach out to me is through my website, which is www.theperfectcatch.com. You can fill out a questionnaire about the middle of the page. It says, what's holding you back from love? You click on that, and there's 10 brief questions that ask about where you are now and where you'd like to be. And then the next click will take you to my online calendar, and you can schedule a complimentary conversation with me. Also, on my website, you can join my mailing list. It will give you the repeat of our podcast from each week, as well as what's exciting things are coming up for me in the future. Oh my goodness. And then if you scroll to the bottom of the page, it's all my social media, where it's Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram and Twitter and YouTube and Pinterest. You can also send me a personal email at Christine@theperfectcatch.com and tell people how to reach you, Mr. Selby.
Well, thank you so much for asking. For me, I have a similar setup with the website and social media and everything else as well. So first of all, to go to my website, which is my name, barryselby.com. On the homepage there, you've got 3 choices. So again, similar to Christine, I also have social media links too, but the main 3 on that page is a sign-up opportunity to have a conversation with me directly. So you can definitely click in the Let's Chat button, which will take you to a calendar and a questionnaire similar to what Christine has. So you can find out where you are. And we have a conversation on my calendar that fits your schedule, and we can get to talk about what you need and where you want to go. At the bottom of the screen is the opt-in to my email list, which is straightforward. Just put your name in there. You're on my list. You get to know what's going on with me in the upcoming months and weeks, which I'll tell you about in a second. In the middle of the screen is a link to the quiz that I built, the first one, because I've got 2, and I'll get the second one in a moment. But the first quiz is your relationship readiness assessment. So basically, if you are single and not sure where you want to go and not sure what your preparation energy you like is about relationship, take my quiz. You'll find out. So click on that button or go to barryselby.com/quiz. And you can take the quiz right there, and it'll give you some clarity of perception of what your evaluations are, and also where you want to go, with an invitation to talk to me about it afterwards as well. The second quiz, which I just launched last week officially, although it's not on my site to be seen, you have to know where to go. It's barryselby.com barryselby.com/self quiz, because it is the self relationship assessment. Because the thing I'm discovering more and more in my work is a lot of people don't have a very aligned self image. Their self relationship is not necessarily as polished as it could be. And frankly, if you're out there and you want to date, I am very much about you being the best partner you can be. You talk about being the perfect catch. I talk about saying you need to be a better partner to attract a better partner. So taking my quiz, the self relationship quiz, which is barryselby.com/self quiz, is a direct assessment of your own positioning in relationship to yourself and to the world. And also that one's even better now because it has got a downloadable PDF that goes with it. So it's got lots of good ideas and insights. So definitely want to check that out. And on that, there are 7 aspects, and I'm actually building out 7 courses based on that. So take the quiz now so you'll be ready to go for the next steps. After all that, on social media, it's my name is Barry Selby on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on X, still on X some of the time, and on Facebook and in Pinterest. And then I'm the real Barry Selby on Threads and on Instagram. If you want to send me an email, you just want to send me at barry@barryselby.com. I think that's everything.
And your book.
Oh, yes. Thank you. I'm so see what I'm doing. I also have a best-selling book. And there's also now on my book page, which is barryselby.com/book, there is a 12-minute review of my book by 2 AI voices, which is actually very accurate. So if you want to check that out for yourself for fun, go to my book page and click on the audio replay. Now listen to these 2 experts talking about my book.
I love that. It's so fun. AI is getting in everything.
It is.
So we're here every week live at 1 o'clock Pacific and 4 o'clock Eastern and all the times in between. And then you can watch us on Roku and Apple TV, all of our podcasts of over 200 now. Or you can take us with you, right, Barry, and listen to us.
Absolutely. And by the way, you can also watch us on YouTube, so don't miss that one out too.
Oh, I forgot that one. Thank you.
Oh, yes, it's very easy to find there too. But definitely you can take us with you when you're out in the world doing whatever you're doing, because we have them as an audio podcast now. So if you listen to podcasts on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you listen to your podcasts, you can take us with you when you're driving, hiking, riding your bike, shopping, socially. You can listen to us. Well, one day socially, you want to have fun with your friends. But if you're out in the world,
this, right?
Maybe want to play it publicly. That's a good point. Thank you. Yeah, share it with your friends.
We could be a subject of them to discuss.
Indeed, we could.
Yeah. I would be okay with that. Would you be okay with that?
I would be too. Yeah, absolutely.
And so we will be back with more fun subjects next week. And bye for now.
Take care of yourselves. We'll see you soon.